Another important change that we made in version 68 was introduction of the group concept. It's one of those things we should have done 15 years ago, but anyway, it's never too late. So we did it in 68. We essentially took the concept of permissions and wildcards and that we had in various areas into a more consistent way of doing things. So we essentially make it possible to group extensions and accounts together and give it name, and then assign essentially permissions and rights to that group. And so this is something that is on a new page called groups inside the domain, or now it's called tenant. That's also something we did. We named it to tenant because everything is multi-tenant. So everything is a tenant now. So you can create any number of groups in a tenant, and then you can, for example, create a new tenant, a new group, sorry. Give it a name, for example, the VIP users of a group. You can pick which of the users are VIP users. Let's see, these two people here are VIPs. You can define a scope. Essentially, it means to whom it applies. So, for example, I say the scope is to all accounts because these are VIPs and they have an account. Their permission should be visible to everyone, and we can now give them like a permission. For example, I want to give them the permission to see mailbox statuses. I want to give them permission to do paging, and I want to give them the permission to view and manage CDRs. So hitting the save button. And they show up actually as text, which is a little bit raw, but on the other hand, it means we're very flexible, adding permissions all over the place in the code. And so we can, if we want to, we give it a color. However, that makes only sense if if this is a group that's visible in the front end. So this is a pure administrative thing, and we can even give it a priority if we want to. This is also for the front end. I will show you that later. So I can create that group. So, and here we just created that group, and we see what permissions were given it in the real name. And so we can obviously edit others. So, and this way we can group these permissions nicely together. We have written something that automatically converts the various permissions we had in the previous versions into the 68 groups. That means if you're upgrading from an older version to the new version that includes the groups, it will take the old permissions that we had in the various places and converts it into groups. It might here and there create a little bit kind of group, maybe a lot of groups if you had a lot of permissions. The main purpose is to make it backward compatible so that you don't have to set everything up again. However, I would definitely recommend after an upgrade, if you have the time, to review it once or twice to make sure everything goes exactly and how it's supposed to be. So there's one more thing about the groups that is really new. We always had the problem that we wanted to control what extensions are being shown on the user front end when the user logs in, and we can control that now also with the groups. It's a little bit like the button profiles on the desktop phones. So with the groups concept, we can essentially define what button profiles are visible. The difference is that on the soft phone, we're not stuck with one button profile. We can actually have multiple, so that the user can switch between different views. For example, can switch to a group for salespeople, maybe switch to a group of the support people, of administrative staff. So they can essentially switch between those groups. I have set up here like a sales front-end group, and so we have right now 3 people in that group. The group scope actually I make it, let's say, all accounts, and the group permission is just AI. I can actually give it a color. Let's say I'll pick green, and I give this priority number 1. So now if I switch to an account, let's say I go into 401 and go into that mode, I will see here, this is my group sales now, and if I click on it, I can see those 3 people that I had in there. I can actually make this also a bit smaller so that the layout is not totally broken. So this is something that the administrator can set up, so the user doesn't have to set it up by themselves. And I think that makes it better usable, especially in bigger teams, to give them like a predefined group that they will see, and they don't have to see the whole extension list when they log in. And what we also have done on the front end is we made it a lot more efficient. That means the front will only subscribe to the visible elements. That means if you have like 1,000 users in your domain, only a few will be shown at that moment, and that means we're only sending the updates to the visible users, and the other will stay invisible. So, and I think this is another great thing that we should have done a long time ago, and I think it will make it a lot easier to do the administration for a larger amount of people. You don't have to go into each and every extension and enable those permissions there, so you can do this easily from one web page. And I hope you enjoy the version 68. This is one of the big features that we're coming out with.